Welcome to For the Love of Books, Bees Books Edition, a podcast by North Lanarkshire Libraries.
Hi, this is Pari.
And this is Jenny.
And we're here to welcome you to
Bees Books.
Sorry about us. Me. Jenny, you sounded lovely. I'm sounding super awkward because usually Jenny really helpfully prints out some prompts for us because my memory is atrocious.
Absolutely.
And today we have having like some printer problems in Coatbridge Library, which is affecting our show.
It's like the end of the world as we know it.
And today, of course, when the printer's not working, like a dozen people have come in to print stuff. It's like they were waiting, they knew.
Yes.
And yeah, so I feel all out of sorts today.
The thing is, we hardly ever look at the notes when
That's
they're there,
true.
but because they're not there, we're aware that they're not there. So
They're my emotional support notes.
So please bear with us.
Yes.
What I do remember though is that this week's theme was heroes and villains.
Oh, excellent. I'm glad you did
Yes.
remember. Because I was like, oh, that's usually after me. But yes, it was heroes and villains. And this is a theme I usually love.
Yes.
Like, I think a lot of my previous recommendations spoke about how things disrupt heroes and villains, which is my favorite kind because I feel like villains are really interesting.
Yes.
More
yes.
interesting sometimes than heroes.
Yes.
Not always, but
Yes.
yeah. What about you?
No, I'm the same. I feel as if this conversation is going to be more about heroes and villains in general rather than particular books. But I have chosen some books. Books being operative.
Yeah, you have like a stack there.
So I've chosen Lord of the Rings to talk
okay.
about because I've got a lot to say about a certain character. But I was also taking a selection of Percy Jackson, Rick Riordan books because
I see.
especially the Percy Jackson books, the whole book is about heroes and
That's
villains.
true.
I mean,
That's
the whole
true.
series, the whole world is about heroes and villains. So that's kind of a good one to kind of leapfrog us into a proper conversation.
I also really like, so basically like a little bit taking on what I was saying earlier and why I love heroes and villains. I love it when they have like complex motivations. Like
Yes.
it's not just, hero good, villain bad.
Yes.
And I feel like Percy Jackson and a lot of the Rings as well, especially now with the new Prime series, which is looking at like the prequel of, it's really interesting to see them more nuanced. So it's not just like, their decisions sometimes you can empathize with, or you might not do the same thing, but you
Yes.
see why they're doing it, and sometimes they shift as well, as like the famous
Yes.
Darth Vader
Absolutely.
thing, sort of, turning around. Spoiler.
Sorry. Take Game of Thrones. Everybody in that at one point is a baddie and is
That's
at one
true.
point a goodie.
That's true.
Every single character
Yeah.
has something, and I think that kind of reflects normal life.
Yeah.
We all are put in circumstances where we make a decision, perhaps not the right decision at the time, but when you look back on it, you go,
Absolutely.
well, that's a decision that I made, and
Yeah.
I must run with that.
Yeah, and also like how it depends on, I think, the perspective of who is the one who's doing the decision making.
Yes.
I guess like for some people, some characters or people are sort of not, I don't want to say heroes, but like good guys.
Yes, uh-huh.
Whereas for the same people in other person's eyes, it depends on you, like you were
Yes.
saying, the circumstances and the events.
I do see that you have books though.
I do. I have like, so one is sort of more in your line, more traditional. It's called Nevermore. It's one of my favorite children's book middle grade series, and the first book's called The Trials of Morrigan Crow. So I have to admit, I mentioned my atrocious memory before. I read this book, like this is the first in the series. There's 2 more and the 4th's coming out next year. So I haven't read them in a while now. So what I remember, like when you said heroes and villains, or when B said heroes and villains, and when you told us last time that that's going to be the theme, I did think about this book. So Morrigan Crow is basically like she was born on a really unlucky day. And all the kids in this town where she lives and all the kids who are born on that day are supposed to die.
Oh.
Yeah, just like death. Not even like something like, maybe they're just, no, you're supposed to die. But she doesn't. And that's why she's considered like super unlucky. So she's blamed for all sorts of random things. Like, a rainstorm like ruined the crops. It's Morrigan's fault. This person like tripped and fell and broke their head. Like, it's Morrigan's fault. So it's that sort of thing. But then there's like this person who comes and takes her away to the secret sort of society, a secret magical school called the Wondrous Society for Wonders Art, something like that. And this really fun looking guy, a mentor called Jupiter North, takes her, and Nevermore is the place. But even there, she's like, you find this out. So I don't know if this is in the first book or in the next two books. Like I said, I don't remember where I read what. But even within that world, she is sort of like, she has some characteristics that's revealed that makes her not unlucky, but like really like people are really wary of her in the world. So she's considered like pretty like a bad guy in the world, and like people want to kick her out of school and things. So she has to really prove to like herself and to the others that she belongs there, and she's not really the bad guy that she's made out to be. Like, it's based on like decades of like stereotypes and things like that. And it's really fun. It's like a magic school, but like set, well, I mean, not in a timeless age, but like it's more contemporary. So, and it's really fun. So
it is a beautiful cover.
Yeah.
And I do like at the top that it's kind of had a wee nod by Robin Stevens, who does the Murder Most and Ladylike books that we both are now. I am addicted to as well.
Oh yes, and this is Jupiter North here, who looks like, you know, he's like a very sort of eccentric, shall we call, shall we say, kind of person, and just it's filled with like really weird characters.
I love the names as well.
Weird, yeah, and it's just a really, like, it's one of my favorite books that I've read, like series in the last few years. The other one, I have two books, like nothing compared to your stack, but this takes a slightly unusual tack at the theme. It's called Wild City: Encounters with Urban Wildlife, and I think I'd mentioned it to you before.
Yes.
It's by Florence Wilkinson, and it's basically looking at the natural life in cities, which, like, as the premise of this book is, doesn't quite go, like, when you think of nature, you don't think of cities, but she's trying to sort of challenge that a little bit, and like I'll say why I think it fits into the theme, because it doesn't feel like it does.
It's another beautiful cover
It
as
is.
well.
It is. It's beautiful, like, and this is one of my favorite books that I read this year. Like 5-star Goodreads. I love this book.
As you know, I'm not a big fan of non-fiction, but the cover doesn't yell at me non-fiction.
No.
The cover yells at me, read me.
Yeah, like it's like
It's
beautiful. Come, yes.
Yes.
And like, I wish all books were this beautiful. It's just like a green cover with golden embossed illustrations. Like, I would love this just as in my library.
Yes. No, it's very pretty.
Yeah, so now
Anyway,
tell
sorry.
me. Yes, no, we just got distracted by the cover.
Easily distracted.
Easily
yes,
distracted
yes.
by book covers.
So, Lord of the Rings. We're going to have a quick talk about that. So, I haven't read the books for a long time, but as we know, there was very good movies recently, and as you say, there's new things coming out. But what I wanted to talk about was Sam in the books. So everyone talks about Frodo and him being the hero, but in my eyes, Sam is the actual hero of the whole thing.
I agree.
Without him, Frodo would have drowned, been eaten by a spider. You know, there's quite a
Fall
lot.
into the dark side.
Yes, exactly. Whereas Sam is kind of like a unsung hero. And what I like best is that he does have a nice ending.
Yeah.
So Frodo goes off into the sunset and things like that. He's been very much affected. But Sam himself, although he's been around all that, reverts back to being Sam at the end of it, which I think is a nice way of saying that yes, he was a hero and he gets a good ending.
Yeah.
But I think there's lots of characters and lots of books like that. For example, in Harry Potter, Neville is a very unsung character. You know, right at the end, he's the one that kind of gets everybody there.
Yeah.
But he's never seen as a kind of hero.
Yeah.
He's just kind of...
But especially, like, you see that right from the first book, though, you know, because he was the only one who, like, he gets like 5 points or something at the end of the first year because he actually stood up to his friends and, like, you know, that's why he gets rewarded, which is a different kind of courage. Actually, I think it's a more difficult form of courage. Like, it's I think easier to stand up to somebody you don't like, you know, like, or not even stand up, to disagree, to like even within like workplace or like with friends and like partners. It's easier to like oh yes, these people, like, you know, they think like this, whatever. You can like argue or whatever, but with somebody that you like or you love and you think that, oh, this is actually, I think this is a bit sus, so what do you do? And so most times people might not choose not to sort of like to avoid conflict and things, but he, like, even though he's this sort of bullied character,
Absolutely.
and these are literally his only friends, or like friendly to him, and he's standing up to them and making them very angry, which is, yeah, I agree.
Yes. I'm looking at your jumper and it's got sheep on it.
Uh-huh.
And what you said there, that sometimes people do like peer pressure, like sheep. They
Yeah.
go along with things, and yes. And in his way, Sam is the same. There's plenty of opportunities that he could have just given in or,
True.
you know, walked away. But no, he's kind of stood by him.
Yeah, he could have chosen a more comfortable life. Like, he didn't need to
No,
at all
exactly.
do the kinds of things that he ends up doing.
Exactly. At the end of the first book, you know, he jumps in and goes off in the boat. You know,
Yeah.
he could have walked away at that point.
Yeah.
But no, he's... Courage, yes, is a brilliant word that you just used.
Yeah.
You know, to kind of go and do what needs to be done.
Or even go against, like, I guess, what you've been conditioned to believe, like,
Absolutely.
that you should want or you should seek, like, like, especially among the hobbits, but people as well, like,
Yes.
comfortable lives and, you know, not, like, rocking the boat.
No, exactly.
And things like that, and like,
Exactly.
oh, someone else will take care of like all the things that are
Mhm.
going on in the world, but like here they step up.
Yes. I'm not saying that Frodo isn't a hero. I feel quite bad for
No,
Frodo
no.
now, because he is, you know.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes people's in books, people's friends, you know, are kind of underestimated as being a force to help the hero be a hero. Does that make
Absolutely,
sense?
yes, because you need, and I actually love that even in Nevermore, like she starts off, Morrigan, she starts off as like this loner kind of thing, and like eventually she builds up like relationships and friendships with people who sort of see her as more than like her title or whatever it, like, you know, the sort of thing that she's supposed to be unlucky or like bad for this visiting this magical society, and they get to know her and then they support her, and she wouldn't have like I think been able to, and she is like a really powerful magician, but she could have gone to the like dark side, I guess.
Yes.
And she still could, like, but it's, I think the relationships, like you're saying, the people who allow her to be, so if she'd surrounded herself with like the Draco Malfoys of the
Yes.
world, she would probably not have. But even with that, with Draco Malfoy, his character evolution, because the kind of things he's surrounded by,
Yes.
his family and friends and house, push him in a certain way. So it's almost like this sort of the world around you is making you a hero or a villain,
Yes.
and how you have to break out. Like Sam could have just been like a potato farmer.
No, exactly.
in Hobbiton, you know, but he's choosing to step outside that role.
I think sometimes villains are just heroes without any friends to keep them on the right path.
Yeah.
We've talked quite a lot about Harry Potter already.
Yeah.
But you know, you look at Snape. Snape in the, you know, has this like core belief in something. We'll not spoil it for people that have not.
No.
But you know, he comes across as being a different type of person. But inside, there's that, you know, moment that he's chosen to do something different than what he's been told.
Yeah, I think I really like that point, and I really like that with sort of in your traditional stories about heroes and villains, that, you know, it's based on decisions rather than the
Absolutely.
person that they are. Like a hero could have made another decision and led down like
Absolutely.
a completely like different paths, and the same with the villain. Like even Voldemort, for that matter, if he'd had like, he's shown to be the sociopath, but if he'd had a different kind of upbringing, a different,
Absolutely.
you don't know what would have happened, you
No,
know, like
exactly.
it's more, and like this is obviously Harry Potter, still like a simplistic sort of children's
Yes.
book series, but I think that sort of applies to a lot of adult narratives, but also to like the world's narratives.
Absolutely.
That we're currently horrible
Sometimes
things
you're put in a
happening.
place where, you know, there is a rock and a hard place, and no matter what you decide, you know, it's going to be wrong for somebody.
Yeah.
And people will always say you're a baddie before they'll say you're a goodie, if
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah, but then I suppose it matters like what you choose to do after
After.
that. So like what you said about not having anybody, like not having friends, because I think, and the friends provide an important role in like what Neville did in like calling you out on your nonsense as well. Like
Absolutely.
I think like with partners, friends, families, whoever, you have that one person to be able to tell you you're being stupid.
Yes.
Like just calm down.
We all need one of those.
Yeah, because everyone has like their, moments of
Yes.
like whatever. And you just need a community to be able to be a better version of yourself.
And I think we've talked about that before, about community and characters and how, their circle of friends or where they are in the story, makes a difference.
Absolutely. So this is now completely different.
Yes, I'm interested.
Yes. So for me, the reason that I chose Wild City for this theme specifically is so like what okay, I'll just read a little bit and then I'll I think that'll explain it better. So this is from the foreword, her introduction. If you ask most people where you should go to get closer to nature, they will likely reel off a list of remote or exotic locations. Dense woodlands, rushing rivers, open seas, maybe the Serengeti even, or the Arctic tundra. Tundra? We use the phrase the natural world as if it exists in a bubble, divorced from our everyday lives. The implication is that nature only belongs in places that are natural, and cities are man-made and therefore inherently unnatural. Such arguments ignore the fact that we humans are animals ourselves, and in any case, nature does not respect these imagined boundaries between natural and man-made. So, where we see a tower block, a peregrine falcon sees a cliff. What looks to us like an old canal tunnel could easily resemble a cave to a bat. For bees and other pollinators, a hanging basket is a tiny wildflower meadow. Even the famous Trafalgar Square fountains have served as ponds for a passing mallard or two. And so she talks about how by 2050, most people are going to be living in cities. Like even now, the sort of it's switched over to how many people live in villages versus cities. So it's going to be a super urban environment. And meanwhile, large swaths of the countryside have become inhospitable to our native wildlife due to industrialized farming, land management practices, and pollution. So these inescapable realities are forcing nature to find new ways of surviving and even thriving in an urban environment. So basically what she's saying is that a lot of species that we would consider as that you'd find out in these places that are outside of cities and towns are making their homes, but we tend to focus on the really cool, the nice, the bees. Now everyone's talking about the bees or the falcons or whatever. But there are some more unlikely sort of heroes in her world.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah. So it would be things like pigeons or foxes or grey squirrels, which are quite villainized, even seagulls for that matter, which are quite villainized among a lot of people in that for various childhood trauma reasons as well. But through her thing, she visits a lot of different cities in the UK, including in Glasgow, to see how different species have thrived. And she talks about this is actually a survival story, and it works because it's happening in the cities and they're living it's both humans and these animals are coexisting together, because foxes, for example, find a lot of food and things that humans leave out, or these caves and things that they can build because humans have bad construction practices or whatever. And she's sort of asking us to reimagine what we mean by the natural world, and how even this sort of looking at a pigeon, it really changed my mind about pigeons. I've had childhood trauma about pigeons when I was in Mumbai, not seagulls here. And I just sort of started seeing them as that's actually true. They're surviving in really harsh condition where humans are taking over the world and they have to struggle to survive. But now they're thriving in the very spaces in cities where there are so many humans. And I don't know about you, but for me, I love grey squirrels because those were my first encounter, I think, really. And in Glasgow, they're really, very brave. They just come up to you. And there's some in my back garden. I've seen generations of grey squirrels. But for some other people, they are really the villains in the story because they're taking over the space from the red squirrels just because they've adapted so well. So even foxes and things have adapted so well. Pigeons and seagulls have adapted really well to human environments. And there's a conflict sometimes. Some people will see them as oh my god, we don't want, they put up spikes and things to put them away. but she just writes with so much love about these creatures, like even mosquitoes under like these London underground tunnels. She's not telling us to embrace mosquitoes.
I'm not going to embrace a mosquito ever.
No, but she's found like there's this like under the London underground tunnel, like in some generations ago, like when it first started, like in the 1800s when they were built, these the London Underground, somehow they made their way down and they've like started a whole separate species. So there's one under like one of the lines, I forget what the Victoria line mosquitoes, and like they have like it's like evolved into a separate species because then they don't come out up into the world, they just sort of live there, and they mostly like eat like feed on like all the creatures that you have underneath, so not people unless you're going down to do construction work there. But it's just like you don't see cities as a place where wildlife thrives.
No, exactly.
But as she writes that she's like like she grew up in a semi-rural part of Essex, and she said that I'd never seen a kingfisher until I moved to London because it's like, you know, it's just this idea of like, oh, the like countryside being more hospitable to like nature. And she also talks about how London, they've actually I think they're now like I forget what it's called, but they're basically a natural park, but a city national park.
Right.
So they're trying to like build like corridors for like, they do this, she writes about this, like corridors for hedgehogs and things. So like construction workers looking after the nature and people like bats and things, not being scared of bats, which I was very scared of as a child when like bats would come too close. But here like she's just asking us to look at these creatures that you might otherwise consider not to be real, not heroes I guess, but not villains either. Like she's just asking us to, how do you live together with creatures that you don't like necessarily might not like get along with. And I think she makes that argument for people as well. Like it's not like she's obviously focusing on nature, but like she's like, you know, we need to learn to live with amongst different kinds of people as well. And I think it goes hand in hand, like especially like, you know, with the climate crisis and things.
Absolutely.
How do you work together? And it's a much more positive story, I think, of coexistence, because she's researched so much, she's gone all over the country, like the countries, I guess, and talked about things, and it's really made me reimagine like my relationship with nature and also fall more in love with cities. I'm like a real city person, so I love this book.
A few episodes ago we were talking about Halloween, scary things, and you had the giant book, the climate crisis book, which basically sounded like the end of the days. Whereas this book, as you just said, sounds more hopeful. It's kind of like, well, there are ways that we can work together. There are ways that, you know, we all think that pigeons are evil, that seagulls are terrifying, things
which
like
they
that.
are.
Yes.
But
why should we be the ones to, you know, if we can live together, why shouldn't we live together?
And like I'm sure we seem terrifying to a lot of
absolutely.
You know, like, but they've like thrived now. They like, I guess they get off on terrorizing human children.
And in a way, it's nice to know that evolution is still evolutioning, if that's a word.
Absolutely.
Because obviously they have this, you know, we've seen foxes quite often in our street.
Yeah.
Because you hear a noise, you think, what on earth is that noise? And it's a fox having a wee conversation.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, and they are living off what we think of as rubbish, or, you know, the bad stuff in essence that we do. They've kind of worked a way to live with that and make that good for them. So in a way it is good for them, and it's also good for us.
Absolutely.
To make that work.
Yeah, and like just how can we sort of, I think a lot of it is also lack of knowledge.
Yeah.
Like, you know, before I read this book, I didn't know there were so many different kinds of species that she talks about. So from mosquitoes, I know mosquitoes is a bit of an odd one, but she goes to like the cooler birds, I guess, of like the ones that she includes, both the ones that are easy to love and the ones that are difficult to love. And she's like, you don't even need to love them. You just need to live with them.
Accept them
and
as they are.
Exactly. Because you're like, mosquitoes are just doing what mosquitoes do. Like, you know, for in their sort of world, like we don't matter and except as food sources.
And saying that, bed bugs.
Oh,
definitely.
No, she doesn't talk about bed bugs there. But yeah. And she's also talked, so she wrote this book during COVID, or she started just before, but she was talking about how during COVID, a lot of people got sort of more attuned to the nature around them, because there wasn't the pressures of everyday life, because you only could go out on a walk like once a day, and just just like learn to pay more attention to what's around you. She's also launched an app. She launched this like in 2017, I think, called Wobbler, with a researcher. So basically, it's like if you hear bird song, you can just record it and the app will tell you what the bird is. So like, because if you can't recognize it, so she's melding technology with nature. Again, like not really expected, I guess, companions, but just I think a way, because I think humans have a lot more to sort of say in how the world, develops and evolves, like evolution. So she's talking about the evolution of cities hopefully being inclusive of not just people but also like the other creatures, which I love. So I love this book. I feel like because I was not I'd read this a few months ago, and like I hoarded this like for several months. I've now let it go, but like I love it so much that I want to buy a copy of my own. I fully recommend it.
It does go with our theme, because Florence Wilkinson, I'm reading upside down, does sound a complete hero.
That's true.
Herself. To get the word out there, to kind of remind us that, we all have to live here.
You're right. Oh, I love that perspective of it. Yes. I also thought, like, when you first started saying that, I was like, oh, Florence Wilkinson sounds like a great hero name, and I was with you even with that.
Yes, it
but
does.
Yes, yours is a much nicer.
I have to say as well, your character in the other book, is it Morrigan?
Morrigan Crow?
Morrigan Crow.
Oh, they could be like in, I think like Florence and Morrigan Crow, I think. Yes. Because she talks about crows as well.
I think Florence would be a good friend.
She would. She
would keep her on the straight and narrow.
Absolutely. What about, I think we have like a few more minutes left. Do you want to quickly tell us about Rick Riordan? Like what you love about Rick Riordan?
So I love the whole world of Rick Riordan. I love Percy Jackson, but I do love the other kind of side books that have come out from that. We've got Magnus Chase, we've got one of his newest ones, Daughter of the Deep, which is a kind of it's more kind of in the ocean.
Was it based on 80,000 Leagues Under the Sea?
Yes, it was. Thank you for rescuing me there. I felt I was 400 Leagues Under the Sea there. And he just weaves such a great world. But Percy Jackson is very much heroes and villains, and they all have, who the heroes are and who the villains are. And it's very, I just love it. It's kind of world that you could just go into and never come out again. But in that, again, there's core friendships. Yeah. There's core teams, no matter which one you're reading, there's like, specific teams. Percy Jackson is the hero, but he's got his...
Yeah, he would have been nowhere without his friends.
Exactly. Yeah. But just a wee secret here, we're recording this in the boss's office, and on her desk, just behind you, is a bookseller, and on the front of it is, if you could pass it over, Pari, if you don't mind, is a book that I seen as I was talking there. I want to read this series now.
Me too. It's called Skandar and the Chaos Trials by A.F. Stedman.
And it looks very...
Percy Jackson-esque.
Yes, I don't know what it's about.
Oh, it says my daughter has rated them better than Percy Jackson, 5 stars. So there you go.
Who knows who this person is, but their daughter likes it. So.
I mean, the children's books are...
I quite like this, actually. There's no names on any of these 5-star reviews.
I guess they could have made them up, but I trust them.
But it says heroes and unicorns, as you've never seen them before. Unicorns.
Oh, I see them, the unicorns on the thing. But also, just, when we were talking about heroes and villains, and as you dubbed Florence Wilkinson as a hero, I think Rick Riordan himself has that kind of role, first of all, because I think he's made it a point, and he's written about this, to be very inclusive of the characters he represents. Like, he started off writing Percy Jackson because his son has ADHD, so he wanted to write ADHD into the thing as like a sort of, not a superpower, but as an asset rather than a deficit thing. But throughout his series, he's also grown and evolved and learned about different things. So he's included like a diversity of identities. And there was this one thing he retweeted a few years ago where like a child, a parent was trying to explain to her child, I think, non-binary identities, because one of their friends was non-binary, and the child was like, oh yeah, I've read about this in like I think one of the books, the Viking one, I think. Also like them, oh yeah, that's fine. And it was that easy. And even gone further, that he's obviously written about a lot of different mythologies and retellings, but he's used his name. He's become so popular and like well loved. He's used his name to start an imprint called Rick Riordan Presents, where he has opened up the sort of opportunity for writers from other cultures. So I know there's like a really popular Hindu mythology one. There's like like sort of a Southern American, like Latin American thing. There's like different cultures, and he's encouraging people from those cultures to write about their own mythology. So he's not gatekeeping the kind of privilege and the popularity that he has. So I love that about him, that he
is a true hero.
Like he's not just looking out. Like I think that's what you said right in the beginning about community as well. Like I think he is sort of doing that. He's not putting himself up on a pedestal like I am the only one who's allowed to do this. I'm actually opening up the doors for like a community of storytellers to, you know, become popular, to tell their own stories, to get more people hooked, and like I love that.
Which is the point of stories, I think, in general. All authors are heroes, apart from possibly the author that wrote the book that you don't like. But
maybe to somebody he would be a hero.
Yes, exactly. Absolutely. To you he's a very much villain, but but yeah, stories are there to kind of you know, get everybody included, you know, and even if somebody doesn't like a story, you know, they've read it and they can talk about why they didn't like it.
And somebody else will be the perfect book for them. Like they'll find it and they'll love it.
Yes, the perfect book for me would be Tamsin Muir's 4th book. Hint, hint.
So well, hopefully we have to talk about it, and we'll like ask B to present a theme that fits in that. But speaking of, do you know what our next theme is going to be?
I do, even without my notes, Pari. It's a nice easy one. It is feeling festive. However, I do remember that there was a question mark after that. So I'm going to try it in a different way. Feeling festive? Or is it feeling festive? I'm not sure, because you know, so I think we can take that.
It also sounds like a threat. Feeling festive.
Well, which is what I'm like near Christmas. How dare you not feel festive? I will blow glitter on you until you do.
Well, I was more thinking like, are you feeling festive? Are you? Well, wait until you hear this, and then like I'm not going to let you. So we come from very different.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it can be different.
Yes, but she's very definite that there's a question mark.
There is. I love that question mark. It's gotten me thinking. I don't know what I'm going to talk about, but hopefully something festive.
Before, you know, festive period means different things for different people. So
sometimes it's happy, sometimes it's murderous.
Yes.
So we shall find out. But it was lovely talking to you. I think Bee's happy with our oddball choices. Yours were mostly traditional. Mine was oddball, so sorry to drag you in.
No, that's absolutely fine. That's good. That's what we're here to do, is to talk about books that people wouldn't necessarily pick up.
That's true. That's such a nice way to end it. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll be back soon.
Bye.
Bye.